Just as the coming into being of a child is said to be dependent on both mother and father, so the coming into being of visual cognition is said to be dependent on both eye and visual form. So it's actually quoted by Chandrakirti in his commentary, and some editions put that verse mistakenly into MMK itself. So let's proceed to the verse that we want to, the original verse of MMK.
draṣṭavya-darśanābhāvād vijñānādi-catuṣṭayam nāstīty upādānādīni bhaviṣyanti punaḥ katham.
Draṣṭavya-darśanābhāvād vijñānādi-catuṣṭayam nāstīty upādānādīni bhaviṣyanti punaḥ katham. MMK chapter 3 verse 7. In the absence of seeing and object to be seen, the four that begin with divided consciousness do not exist. Which being so, how will clinging and the rest come again into being? So, again, at the risk of belabouring the point, in the absence of seeing and object to be seen is not a negation of the act of seeing. It's not a negation of enlightenment, except if we think of enlightenment as a thing unto itself. See, if we misunderstand, we'll say, the Buddha wasn't enlightened. That's just a fantasy. I was told that. I remember in my 20s, the place where I was working, very intelligent guy, Japanese guy, but quite cynical. Our enlightenment, that's just fairy stories. No, what the denial of seeing, he's saying there's no such thing as seeing. He means there's no such thing as seeing as a thing unto itself. It's not a denial of the fact that the penny sometime might drop. Similarly, with objects to be seen. There are objects to be, there are things out there to see, things to go and visit, but not as things unto themselves, not as non-empty things, not as non-empty objects as we tend to conceive them. Even somebody as august as George Soros, in his belief in harsh objective reality, tends down that path of conceiving objective reality out there, which he doesn't care about our feelings about it. But what Nagarjuna is saying, no, there is no objective reality out there, independently existing, separately from the deluded subject. So, in the absence of seeing and objects to be seen, the four that begin with divided consciousness do not exist. So those four are vijñāna, divided consciousness, and depending on vijñāna, divided consciousness, there's namarupa, psychophysicality. Then depending on psychophysicality, there are śadāyatana, the 6 sense spheres, the 6 seats of sense perception. Śadāyatanamagamya samsparsha sampravartate. 6 sense spheres having arrived, there arises contact. So those are the 4 that begin with divided consciousness. Divided consciousness, psychophysicality, 6 sense spheres, and contact. Those 4, in the absence of seeing of seeing an object to be seen do not exist. Again, they do not exist as non-empty things. As empty causes, they most certainly do exist. They're the whole foundation of the chain of the dependent arising of suffering. So we're not negating divided consciousness as a cause of suffering. We're negating it as a non-empty cause, as a self-existing thing. So to go from the English, in the absence, so that's abhāvād. Abhāva is non-existence, and vāt is the ablative suffix. So abhāvād, from the non-existence. In other words, in the absence. And abhāvād is in a compound with draṣṭavya, the object to be seen, and darshana, seeing. So draṣṭavya-darśanābhāvād, in the absence of seeing an object to be seen. Again, darshana could equally be translated the act of looking and the thing to be looked at. But when we're talking about draṣṭavya, the sense of an object actively to be seen, the end to be gained, somehow makes more sense. So in the absence of seeing an object to be seen, the four, catuṣṭayam, so that's the set of four, and that's nominative singular neuter, I think. Could be masculine, I'm not sure. Catuṣṭayam, the set of four. Vijñāna, consciousness, or divided consciousness, taking the V as standing for dvi, which means two, or separated, divided. Jnana, knowing, consciousness. Vijñāna, divided consciousness. Adi means beginning with, so etc. So vijñānādi-catuṣṭayam, the four that begin with divided consciousness. Then in the third pada, nāstīty, there is not, do not exist. Na plus asti. Which being so, iti. So iti is like quotation marks, and sometimes it means because. So that statement in quotation marks, so, thus. So, which being so, iti, how katham will come into being, bhaviṣyanti, third person plural, future, of bhu, to be, to become, to come about, to come into being. Punaḥ, again, so which being so, iti, how katham will come into being, bhaviṣyanti, clinging, upādāna. So upādāna is, I have to count them up. So first one, ignorance. Second, samskara. Third one, from samskara, there is divided consciousness. From divided consciousness, we've just seen there is psychophysicality. From psychophysicality, there is six sense spheres. From six sense spheres, there's contact. From contact, there is feeling. From feeling, there is thirsting. From thirsting, there is clinging. So it's number 9, upādāna. So clinging and the rest means clinging, number 9. Bhava, becoming, number 10. Jati, birth, number 11. And all the grumbling and complaining, etc., associated with the suffering of aging and death, number 12. So how will clinging and the rest come about? Means clinging, becoming, birth, suffering of aging and death. So those are the final four in the 12-fold chain of the dependent arising of suffering. And the point is, again, it doesn't mean that clinging, there is an enemy of us. Attachment is the enemy. Like somebody wrote a book and ego is the enemy. Yeah, well, very well, but it doesn't exist as a non-empty enemy, is the point to understand. Because if we conceive, especially if we're sort of a rugby playing, karate playing, macho moron, as my best friend at school they described me, we conceive, yes, that's the enemy. Ego is the enemy. Ignorance is the enemy. Attachment is the enemy. Then we want to go out and do its head in. But of course, if we go out and search for it, how hard we look, we'll never find attachment or clinging or ignorance or the ego. Because those things don't exist and can't be destroyed as separate self-existing things. So it's in that sense that he's asking, how will clinging and the rest come again into being? It's an open question, but I'm taking it as a rhetorical question, that clinging and the rest can't come into being as non-empty things once we've understood that in the absence of non-empty seeing and non-empty object to be seen, the four that begin with divided consciousness do not exist. You see, in the clarification of what those four that begin with divided consciousness are, that's divided conscious, psychophysicality, six sense spheres, and contact, those four are all associated with the contact is a seer making contact with the object of visual perception. So if, as we've just examined, we've just been exploring, seeing and object do not exist as non-empty things, then everything can't exist as a non-empty thing. So from the Sanskrit, draṣṭavya-darśanābhāvād, in the absence of seeing and objects to be seen, vijñānādi-catuṣṭayam, the four that begin with divided consciousness do not exist. So do not exist nāstīty. Nāstīty, which being so, they do not exist, which being so, upādānādīni, clinging and the rest, bhaviṣyanti, will come about, punaḥ, again, katham, how. draṣṭavya-darśanābhāvād, vijñānādi-catuṣṭayam, nāstīty upādānādīni, bhaviṣyanti punaḥ katham. In the absence of seeing and objects to be seen, the four that begin with divided consciousness do not exist. Which being so, how will clinging and the rest come again into being? So what he's saying in practice here, how it helps us in practice, if we think of clinging or attachment, the point is not to look forward to a time where you're totally free of attachments. The change that Nagarjuna's teaching points us to and helps us bring about is now a conception of what clinging is. So there's a big difference between struggling with attachment as if it were a non-empty self-existing thing, a real obstacle, a self-existing obstacle that you've got to overcome, and understanding attachment has dependently arisen. I had an email exchange with Michael Latchford over the Christmas and New Year holidays, where he did a little bit of psychoanalysis on me, and was saying, you know, that the anger for which I'm famous really is a function of my own psyche. And for the first time, I think, I was able to look at that kind of amateur psychoanalysis that people, you know, tend to like to do to other people, and realise, no, that's not true. You know, having just gone through chapter 1, it's obvious that these, what people talk about as if they're psychological facts, are not caused by outside, but equally they're not caused from within, because they're dependently arisen. It's as simple as that. And seeing that changes how one thinks about it in practice. So if we're talking about anger, for example, to understand that anger is empty, it's dependently arisen from times without beginning. It's unfathomable and doesn't exist here and now as a thing unto itself. It's dependently arisen, it's empty. It's not caused by, let's say, vestibular faults, and it's not caused by environmental factors or by enemies that have got it in for you. It's dependently arisen. And that, the reason in particular that helps is it's the truth. You know, you hear people proffer explanations which sometimes sound convincing, but somehow one knows they're not the truth. But when you come to Nagarjuna's teaching, you realise he's just telling the truth.
draṣṭavya-darśanābhāvād vijñānādi-catuṣṭayam nāstīty upādānādīni bhaviṣyanti punaḥ katham.